Welcome to the Whole Enchilada, a community of high achievers that fight the status quo, rebel against mediocrity, and make life happen. Let's go.
Hey, Enchilada Nation, excited about our conversation today. Here we are, we're sitting about 45 to 50 days already into 2024. And the truth is, a lot of people I'm talking to are already trying to figure out how to modify their game plan to get on track for the year. It's an interesting year this year. This is where business owners thrive. So I've invited a good friend of mine and a partner. Joe Martin is on the call today to talk to me about a couple things. One is an article, Joe, that you recently shared with me called The 7 Secrets to Q1 Success, which I thought was spot on. Can't wait to jump into that conversation with you. For those of you that don't know Joe, you've got to know Joe if you're a business owner of any level. Swanepoel just named him as one of the top 200 executives to watch in 2024, which is really exciting. And he's also an area director for the KW Virginias and has multiple other roles and investments. Joe, what else should we know about you before we jump in?
I like long walks on the beach. I'm a Leo and the director of janitorial services for all the things that you just covered too. So, but thanks, Marcus. I'm humbled to even hear that kind of like feedback on here, just because it's just like you get up every day and you put one leg into your pants as you go. And I think it's just a matter of continually getting up and realizing that change is inevitable, but your choice to go dive into it is actually going to direct you towards your success in business. So I think that's probably the best advice I can give anybody for the stuff that's going on in my life.
Awesome. Well, you and I have had a lot of deep business conversations. We haven't had one strolling on the beach yet, so we got to figure that one out because I'm sure some new stuff will come out. Maybe we'll both end up embracing it in tears at the end of that conversation. But you are one of my favorite people to talk business with because I think you've got just some brilliant ideas outside the box, which I'm an outside the box thinker too. So let's jump into this. So the article that we're going to be referencing is called 7 Secrets to Q1 Success. Joe shared it over to me several weeks ago, and I didn't look at it immediately. I wanted to wait and give it a little bit of time. But when I pulled it up and read through it, I was like, okay, these are some thought-provoking things that any business owner should be thinking about right now. And if you're not, what's going to happen is you're going to get either mid-year or towards the end of the year, and you're going to be scrambling to figure out why you're off track in a year that takes some creativity and some ingenuity to figure out how we're going to win this year. So, Joe, before we jump into those 7 secrets, like how did this information fall in your lap?
So I'm an information junkie. I think that reading is fundamental, and all of your all the solutions that you're looking for, like history repeats itself just with different players, right? So I think that a lot of times it's that the information that people have and the education they give themselves is the competitive advantage. So one of the biggest things that I've got in my world is I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly looking at, hey, what's my world look like in business? What are the challenges I have? What are the opportunities? And like, where has this shown up in somebody else's life before, right? So where this came from is I sign up for newsletters. Now, I'm sure all of you are like have the unsubscribe game where you're like, how did I get onto this listserv? And I'm trying to get the hell off of it, right? But this one was, I'm always looking for newsletters that give me like thought-provoking or reframes that I don't see in my normal like days and life and business. And this individual, his name's Les McGowan. So some of you have heard or read his book called Predictable Success. So what I love about Les, and I also see a lot of similarities with Ray Dalio, the CEO founder for Bridgewater Capital, who wrote the book Principles on Life and Business, is Les's approach in predictable success is that in business, it's a system. Yes, you have people. Those are really like your nuts and bolts of running the business, and you've got to figure out a system. So that's why I subscribe to Les, is I think he's got a very practical approach to whatever industry that you're in, as long as you're an executive level leadership or owner of a business, that you're going to see some benefits. And this is where it came from, was a newsletter that he sends out. And I caught it and I was like, wow, this is really, really insightful, because I see a lot of these challenges, not only in my business, but also some of the people that I coach and consult with. And when we can take really complex issues and break them down simplistically in a way that you can digest it and take action on, I think that you're leading yourself up for success.
Dude, I think this is, I love that you're bringing this up, and I think it merits flushing out a little bit. I love what you said, that history repeats itself with different players, and that you've committed to be a student of all information. I feel like a lot of people, there's so much information out there to choose from. I think constantly we're choosing information that's only in support of our current beliefs. And if you're only looking at information that's in support of your current beliefs, all you're doing is reinforcing those current beliefs, right or wrong.
100%.
I love this idea of anything we look at in history, it's because someone challenged the norm. And
Yes.
so if we're not willing to look at opposing views in our education right now, how do we challenge the norm and change our future? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think like if you really think about where business opportunities are created, it's where you can reframe something and see an opportunity where everybody else doesn't see it, right? It's kind of like when everybody goes left, how do you go right? When everyone says this is the new trend, how do you create a new trend? Because when you could create a new trend, you create a new demand, which means you create a new market, which means you then can dictate what are the economics behind it, what's the supply of it, and what is the actual purpose of it. And I think a lot of times when we're in business, we want a system that's repeatable because we want to actually be able to control our success. But at the same point, evolution of our industry is inevitable based on technology. So your ability to figure out what is the value, what am I known for, or like what is the current gap. When you think about sales, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm outgoing, I'm like, bubbly, I love people, I lead with like my emotional connection to you. Well, when I think about sales, I think about sales differently. Sales is filling a gap, right? That someone has a gap in their life and this product, service, or offering fills that gap to either save them money, make them more money, or give them time. And when I think about sales, it's no longer about like, oh, I'm outgoing and great on the phone, but it's really like, where's the value creation that I can control in this? And if I'm a master in that industry, I can then use my information that nobody else is like thinking about to reframe and create a whole new market.
I love that idea of looking at sales as a gap. I look at leadership the same way. I think a great leader is constantly looking at the gap. A lot of people have seen my personal mission vision statement, which one segment of it talks about, I call myself a bridge builder, and it's about identifying where is it you want to go, what's your current reality, what's the gap. The gap is the big piece that you need the bridge for to get between the two of them. Same thing from a sales approach. So I love that you look at it that way. All right, should we jump into these 7 secrets and roll through that?
Yeah, let's run through these 7 secrets. I think it's amazing for Q1.
Awesome, let's do it. So first secret here says, identify the low-hanging fruit. And as we go through these, listener, you'll realize that it's not obvious necessarily what they mean by just the bold lettering in front of by the number. I like that they're thought-provoking. So Joe, when you look at identify the low-hanging fruit as a secret to success in Q1, what does that mean to you?
I think that sometimes we as humans try to complicate our work to justify like our compensation or like our value, right? So it's kind of like you ever dealt with an employee that you're like, hey, yeah, I like Joe, but he's kind of like middle of the pack. And then you sit down with Joe and Joe gives you all the reasons why he can't hit a goal and all this and really overcomplicates it. And then you leave that meeting with Joe and Joe's like, you're like, oh, I can't lose Joe because it sounds so complicated. I honestly believe that part of leadership is taking complicated things and making them simple. And the low hanging fruit is sometimes like we overthink what could actually drive revenue immediately because we're always thinking it's got to be harder than that. It's got to be tougher than this. It can't be this easy. And I think that's the first part of Q1. If you think about like your team's their energy levels, that like if you can give them quick immediate wins that give them confidence, and then the second part is they're actually driving revenue, like that, go identify low hanging fruit and go get those out of the way so you can at least pump revenue in, and you're giving your people like an energetic start to the year. They're like, hey, look what I accomplished, I can continue to do this, I can continue to build this, and you end up getting into that cycle of like, hey, we're actually winning. And I think that's the first one you want to hear.
No, I think that's spot on. Particularly right now, we live in a world where we're hearing a lot of new market, new economy, this year, new presidential election, new inflation, new interest rates. So all these new and differents make us think, I guess everything I do has to be new and different too. Where I think the low-hanging fruit stays true through any economy. It's like already within fingertips. Yes, we need to be creative, which we'll talk about some of those things, but not at the expense of missing the low-hanging fruit that's right in front of you. Make sure to capitalize on that, then build on top of that.
Yeah, and I think the other part about low hanging fruit is we know where we could generate revenue in 30 days, right? And sometimes we're like, oh, but that's too easy. We got to go build some. No, just go knock it out of the park on those little things. Because remember, people want to know that they're winning. And sometimes you overcomplicate it to make yourself feel more valuable when in fact you can just go knock it out of the park with that one thing. And I think that's also the other part that you're bringing up when you bring up inflation, the economy, election. You know what those all have in common? You can't control any of them,
That's right.
right? So if you can't control it, I don't want to actually, I might need to know about it, I might need to be educated, but I'm not going to focus my time on something that's out of my control. Whereas when you think about low-hanging fruit, you're literally giving you and your team direct control of their outcomes, which is empowering in a world where you've got a bunch of whirlwind around that you can't really control. So, hey, I would bet on a team that says, I'm not going to worry about what the hell's out of my control. I'm going to go double down on what I can control and knock it out of the park there and let that momentum build.
Love it. Let's move into number 2. Watch for adjustments to make.
This one is one of those catchy ones of like, oh, I'm looking for adjustments. It's actually based on the fact that we're all human, which means our plans are fallible. And what you actually have to think about is like, okay, here's my grand master plan, and I'm a genius, and no one's ever thought of this before. Well, there's one guarantee that I know in life is that you're going to get hit with a left hook out of nowhere and not know it's coming. And this is where you have to be aware of your plan and what's actually failing so that you can like readjust to it quickly so that you can stay on course for hitting your goals and in Q1.
Yep, I love that. And I think a lot of our listeners resonate with kind of my mentality is I'm impatient, I'm quick moving. And one of the things that this one stuck out to me is every business plan can't just be right or wrong. Sometimes it can be almost right, right? And that's the whole, you don't know, it's on a piece of paper, it looks right, but you don't know that until you start going. And the mistake I've made countless times in my career is if the results aren't showing up exactly how I wanted them to on a piece of paper, I make the inclination that this doesn't work, it's broken, it's wrong. I throw the whole thing out thinking I have to start all the way over. Where in reality, it is minor adjustments that need to happen with the game plan. It's almost right. So it's not just throwing it out, but how do I identify the minor adjustments that need to make while I'm moving forward instead of starting all the way from scratch?
Oh, 100%. I think the best way to say this one, and this is what I've had to internalize the past like 5 years, is what's best. So if you think about your mindset around making adjustments on your plan, take the ego out of it and say like, oh, I'm brilliant, I'm so smart, like my plan's going to be flawless. Well, you're human, it's not going to be flawless. But here's another way to think about it on your plan is that you're looking for the best outcome possible, right? So maybe in the current situation, you could only get to 80% of your goal. Well, that's the best option that you have in the current environment. So I would also encourage people when they think about their plan and making adjustments is get away from right and wrong because there's like ego and attachment to it and say, I just want what's best, right? So when you think about your plan and your adjustments, don't get wedded to them and then just keep thinking, what's the best option that I have right now in front of me? Because that's what you need to do to take action and move forward.
Love that. A marketing principle that I learned several years ago that I apply beyond marketing is A/B testing. And what A/B testing is you run two things side by side to gauge the result of them against each other to identify which one's right. So I use this in business all the time. If the results aren't quite showing up, I don't throw the whole thing out the window. Maybe I leave half my team still using that same script. And myself and maybe one other team member, I'll say, hey, we're actually going to run this script today. Let's see what happens. And then you're testing against each other to identify this is how you adjust things moving forward is these trial and error. And that's part of the fun part of business is let's try it and see if it works better, if it's great, or if it's worse, but at least we'll know.
Yeah, 100. The old analogy my grandmother gave me about this one is soup. You like when you make soup, you don't just throw all the ingredients into it and then slam it on the boil and then all of a sudden your soup is great. It's like here's the water, here's the meat, here's this seasoning, here's that seasoning, and you're testing as you go. And I think that remember sometimes it's not even that you need to like kill off the plan quickly. Sometimes we don't give enough time. So even when you think about making adjustments, you also might need to make an adjustment on your time horizon to make sure you've given enough time for it to marinate and actually cook all the way through. And I think that's also the yin to yang of like, hey, I need to make changes quickly. You might also have to say like, is my timeline correct?
Yeah. Ooh, I love it. Good point. I not jotted that down. Number 3, murder your darlings.
So I brought this up on a couple of calls and like people love this number 3 is murder your darlings. So there's a fascinating part of like human psychology is that when we make a choice on something, we'll come hell or high water to prove that it's right or that it's amazing. It's that whole like reinforcement thing of like, I know I got this when I was in school. Like, hey, I got an F on a test, and I'm looking around everybody like, hey, Marcus, what did you get on the test? Oh, I got a D minus. Hey, Jim, what'd you get? Oh, I got a D plus. Oh, Sally, what'd you get? So I'm constantly circling to like justify my choice. But the
Yeah.
murder your darlings thing is that like we all get ideas of like something that's like amazing. Well, unfortunately, we're the only person that thinks it's amazing, whereas everybody else around us is like, this is terrible. And like you're just tied into the fact that this one thing is amazing when it's not. And
Yeah.
I think that's the piece that as business owners is that if you can be radically transparent and open with your people and encourage feedback, in Murder Your Darlings as the leader, you want to make sure you're getting feedback from the people closest to you to make sure that you're on point. Because once again, it's what's best. And I might have to murder what I think is like awesome and great because it's actually a detriment to being able to get to the outcome.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of the old Seinfeld episode with the ugly baby, that nobody thinks their baby's ugly, right? And Kramer will come right out and say it. In a recent episode, I recently talked about the difference between the importance of all three: a peer, a mentor, and a coach. Well, the people on your team, the people that you lead, they may be talking behind your back that your darling's ugly and not working, but they're not going to tell you that because you so enthusiastically stood in front of them and told them how it was going to change the world for them. And so it's really important for you to have people that you trust. Like Joe's one of these people for me that I can call Joe and be like, where am I thinking wrong about this? Like, in fact, we just had this conversation before this call am I thinking about this the right way? And Joe doesn't have a horse in the race with me. He can talk bluntly with me because we have that kind of relationship. You need to have those people in your world for someone to be like, Joe, your baby's ugly, bro. I hate to tell you, but it is. Like you need to shift. And so we get so committed to the game plan that we created. We got to remember what we're committed to is the result. Be more committed to the result than the game plan.
Which then comes that curiosity, right? And what I think is awesome when you can actually take the feedback when someone else says that your baby's ugly, then it's like, but it's okay. There's cosmetic surgery, right? That we can actually change some of these things, right? And I think that's the cool part is like, don't get so wedded to your plan that you can't see a better opportunity, a better path forward. And I think that's where you're 100% right. You need mentors that have no dog in that race and can literally just tell you, hey, you might want to pivot and shift here, and they'll actually make it better. So yeah.
Love it. Number 4, watch entropy.
So we are all, I believe there's a good analogy for people. People are like water. They want to go downhill and follow the path of least resistance, right? So you ever tried to push water uphill? How's that go for you? Doesn't go well. So the watch for entropy thing is really an idea that like, if you're going to make a change, right? You know, we've heard this over and over again is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, when you talk about changing plans or a focus or where you're going to put your time, you eventually also have to be very vigilant around your people to make sure that they're actually not defaulting back to what last year was. So this entropy thing is really, hey, we said this is what our plan was. This is how we were going to do it differently. These are the different people that are going to be doing it. And then as the leader, making sure that people don't default to their bad behaviors or the prior behaviors, even though we've already agreed to move forward in a different path. Because that's just humans.
Yeah, that's right. And it's been interesting so far this year. I've probably had maybe between 100 to 150 interviews or conversations with top producing agents. I mean, these guys have been crushing it in business for a long time, and it's been interesting to me to see the ones that are like applying new strategy and doubling down on like the things they know work versus the ones that instead of using the call of how do we change and get better, it's, well, back in the day, we used to do this. And back in the day, our conversion rate used to be this. And this is how we used to do it. And I'm like, I appreciate that, but I'm not writing a documentary about what you did as we're planning what you're doing today. It's like, well, I can't remember who sings a song that says, someday these will be the good old days. It's like, stop talking about the good old days. Like, let's make these the good old days we're talking about in 10 years from now of how you crushed it. And it's so easy. Like even looking at my own goals for this year, the goals that I'm already crushing for and the systems I built for myself for 2024, guess what? Those habits were already established in 2023. I'm already doing those. The ones I'm struggling with are the ones that took new effort, new habits, new timelines, new calendared items for 2024. Those are the ones that are taking real mental efforts for me to get implemented for this year.
And I think it's just breaking people's habits. That's all it comes down to, right? Is that we're all creatures of habit. We like to be set and forget. And these are the times now. I think we're at the bottom part of this economy where you're going to start seeing interest rates come up in Q3 or get dropped. Sorry, interest rates drop in Q3. So if you can get through the next like 4 to 5 months where we're at, I think you're going to see some light at the end of the tunnel, which is now the time to break those old habits and say like, hey, we're going to drop this. We're going to move forward. We're going to do these new things. And yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. But I think as a leader, this is where like your weekly check-ins become important because your people will be like, oh, Joe said this or Marcus said that, but he never inspected it. This is what I think the big action item is: inspect what your goals are and then see that people are changing. Now, once again, you might have to expand your time horizon because people have to, come to that change on their own because you obviously can't like just like destroy people's like ingenuity. But like at the same point, you'd say, hey, if I get on a call with you for, 6 weeks in a row, I guarantee you at some point you're going to adopt those new habits towards the new goal that we're getting to. And I think that's the cheat code, if you will,
Yep.
for leaders.
Nailed it. And I think that leads perfectly into number 6, which I had, or excuse me, number 5, which I had to Google this one to one, know how to pronounce it, and two, what it meant. But number 5 is call out recalcitrants.
Yeah, so we're getting some fancy words. Now, I grew up in Florida, so I had to Google this word as well when I first read it too. So
That makes me feel better.
I kind of had an idea for it. I was definitely pulling up the old Google on this one. But this is the people that I consider like the ones that you say they're on your team that are saying, yeah, that's a great idea, Marcus, great idea. And then behind closed doors are actually telling you what they really think about it. And this is where in a challenging economy, which still has great opportunities for those people that want to put on, actually do the work, right? So work typically looks like overalls and getting your hands dirty. Then people usually don't like that 4-letter word. But this is where if you're in a one-on-one with your people on a weekly basis, you have to get them to understand why. And I think a lot of times the big challenge with people is that why are we doing this? What's in it for me? And then how are we going to do this? Because a lot of people operate from the fear side of it, of like, hey, I don't know how to do this, and I've got ego, and I don't want to change, I don't want to look stupid. And I think you can actually fix a lot of people on your team just by addressing those things. So this call out, I can't even pronounce it. I'm going to give that a gold star to Marcus for being able to pronounce the word. But it's basically the people that are sabotaging or passively aggressively giving you the pocket veto on the team. And you have to basically, it might be hard because it's change, but take with like ruthless focus on getting rid of these people that are on your team because they're going to be a cancer. Because you could have 75% of the team on track to be on the boat going in that direction, and the 25% of people that are basically pocket vetoing it are going to kill momentum and the energy and culture that you have in your organization. And frankly, what got you here is not going to be what gets you there, which is that's a great book as well. But that's what you're basically getting rid of the people that are not on the boat with you rowing in the same direction.
Love that. Because I honestly think I look at even my own organizations, over the last several years where the wind was at our back, it was easier as a leader sometimes to let a maverick stay on your team other than get them off because everyone was winning, everyone was moving forward. In a more challenging market, a maverick like that can really work against you and take the culture of your team down immediately. It's like, I always know when my kids are all teaming up to do dishes at our house, they're looking over their shoulders to see how hard the other kids are working to determine their own pace off of, right? And so I think this is a time to step up your leadership and know that productivity and results are part of your culture. If productivity and results are part of your culture, it is your job as the business owner, the leader, to hold that accountable. And if someone's not willing to step into that, it's not just that person that's not hitting the goals, they're affecting the whole team's ability to hit the goals.
Going back to, and I'll use this like analogy as well, is going back to history repeats itself just with different players. Every major empire across the world did not lose because of external forces. They lost because of internal forces and internal conflict. So the Roman Empire collapsed because of internal conflict, not because of external like forces. So if you think about that, if I'm going in north and I even have one person that says, no, that's not north, and I'm going to like undercut you the whole time, you got to get rid of them because you don't need internal forces hindering your ability to grow.
Love it. Great point. How interesting. Number 6, make yourself nauseous.
So I forget which one of my mentors said this to me, is like, make your personal life as interesting, chaotic, unique as possible, and make your business life repeatable and boring. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs have a psychological lean where they want optionality. And what I mean by optionality is they don't want to commit to something because there might be a better option later, but they also want the uniqueness of something new every day to give them energy. Whereas what I say to a lot of entrepreneurs is that, like, why in the hell would you want fluctuations in your business? Like, you can go get all the unique new things in your personal life as much as you want because that's new experiences and new energy and all that. But your business needs to be nauseous. And the way you want to think about it is like, I love people and I don't want anyone to take it this way, but you have to realize that in your business, you have models and systems, and then you have people. And it's the blend between models and systems and people that get your business to succeed. So the nauseousness is doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again because you're going to get repeatable results. And with people, it's changing habits, which is going to take time for you leaning into it. But then you also need to know what is the system so that if someone has to be pulled, from the conveyor belt line, can you replace them with somebody because you've made the training models and systems replicatable so you're not on what they what is this? What do they call it? It's like the linchpin syndrome, that you've got like one key person. I'm trying to remember what it's actually called, but basically, like, I'm the only person that can like review your invoices for payment, and I die, like, you're in a huge like system failure. And that's what I hear, like, make yourself nauseous, like that whole idea that, like, hey, I just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and like I'm just so bored by it. But if you're getting the result, you actually need that for scalability.
Yeah. Yeah, it always cracks me up that entrepreneurs in general have a really hard time making connection, that they really dislike sporadic income, right? That's a struggle for them of like, we have this great month and then we have a horrible month, then we have this great month, but they can't tie it to the sporadic way in which they run their business. So it's like there's a clear delineation of, if you want systematic ongoing income, then you need to be running your business very systematic, which can feel boring. But if you look at it, I love the way that what your mentor said to you is, if your business runs systematic and produce systematic income, then you can get as creative and crazy as you want in your personal life. Let your sporadic wild hair live on that side of the equation, and let's get more monotonous. Find out what works, play the A/B testing, get serious about it, and then run that machine like a freaking machine.
Yeah, and if you want more thoughts on, and this is, no sponsorship here, but Ray Dalio's Principles book has a great concept on like systematic models inside your business, even when you talk about the people that are inside of it. And I highly encourage people to read that because it gets you to think differently and reframe your engagement with like repeatable activities.
Out of curiosity, because I haven't read that one yet, I had it referred by a couple of people. Is that one, in your opinion, a physical read or a listen?
So the way he writes it is all like bullet points. So like it's actually you could probably do either one of them, but the read is actually very easy because it's literally bullet points, and he gives exact examples and exact what he's talking about. So it's not a cerebral read. It's literally like a tactical, you're going to be able to go execute on some stuff after you read it. So cool. I really enjoy that book. I mean, it's a hefty one. It's about 500 pages, but you can go through, cut it up by sections and whatnot. I think it's one of the best books I've ever read on business.
Cool. Love it. All right. We're rolling into number 7, the last one, last secret to success in Q1. And I actually really appreciated this one. It's declare amnesty.
Yeah. So I think we all have our own narratives in our head about how life happens, right? And our experiences create a narrative, and that narrative drives our decisions and how we feel about things because we're emotional beings. Declare amnesty is the mature way of saying, hey, there's baggage. We're all humans. We have baggage. Stuff happens, sometimes planned, sometimes unplanned. But the idea behind declare amnesty is getting your whole team on the same page and saying, look, I know this sucked. We jacked this up, and you guys got into it about XYZ on a team, right? Is that we are all going to declare amnesty and allow forgiveness. I think this is considered more grace, is that we're all fallible because we're humans. So like, I actually have had to say this on my teams. I'm like, hey, you remember how I messed up XYZ and how that impacted Marcus, right? And then Marcus is upset because of my failure to deliver on my portion of it, made like a challenge for him. I want everybody to remember that there was no point in Joe's like planning of this where he had a malicious moment where he was like, I can't wait to jack this up to screw with Marcus. I don't actually believe that happens on teams. So when people get emotional in their emails about, I'm disappointed and I feel this way or that way, I have to call these people and say, look, I'm pretty sure Marcus had no like ill intent of like, hey, how can I screw with Joe today by messing this up? So we've got to give people grace and then also forgive um prior happenings and basically saying like, hey, this messed up, I'm going to forgive and keep moving forward. Or hey, I had this like challenge internally with a team member and hey, we're going to get to the bottom of like respect, and that's not what we're trying to do here, and we're trying to get to this end goal together, and I'm sorry that you feel this way, and I'm sorry that my actions did XYZ. And the faster you can do that dump of like old like holding on to things, the faster you guys can move forward, because not addressing the emotional damage of like past issues is just going to linger and linger and linger until you actually address it head on.
Yeah. I think the example you gave right there is like such a phenomenal example of leadership. It was interesting, you know, I've read so many books on leadership, and there's only one book on leadership ever that really talked about the importance of vulnerability as a leader that I've read, which was Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And I was like,
Great book, by the way. Great
great
freaking book.
And it just was like this aha moment of like, oh my gosh, there is a massive gap in my leadership, because the way I was raised was to think being vulnerable was a sign of weakness, when realistically that's what connects you with your team. So being vulnerable, saying, hey, if our team, you as a leader, if I was the leader of a team and the team did not perform last year, my job is not to say, oh, my team didn't do good at this. It was my job to lead. Is I didn't show up as a leader last year the way I needed to show up to make sure they were doing that. And so a couple of things that I think are really interesting with this is, of those 150 conversations I've had this year, one of the things I'm asking those entrepreneurs is, what is your goal this year? So interesting to me that almost, I'd say more than 50, maybe 60% of them answer that question, telling me where they failed last year, not telling me I didn't say anything about last year. But if I say, hey, what's your goal this year? They say, well, last year was a really hard year because of this. And I'm like, you need to give yourself some forgiveness for last year. There were things outside of your control, and look at that as a learning opportunity, but you're obviously hanging on to someone. So I would say that a lot of us need, and I love that you brought up grace. I think a great way to start any of this is, number one, is we as leaders need to give ourselves a little bit of forgiveness and grace for how last year showed up. Ask ourselves what we learned for it. But then also, who in your world needs to hear from you that you're okay with how things showed up last year? Because it's not about that anymore. It's about what we're doing to move forward. And we're not harboring on the results of last year anymore.
Yeah, and I think there's power in that forgiveness that you're talking about, because one, I don't really, the example that Les gave was like people harboring or focusing on Q4 results as you're in Q1. Well, I get learning from your mistakes, but at some point you got to move forward, because you don't have a time machine. And unless you've got a DeLorean somewhere parked in a garage somewhere to be like Back to the Future, like spending more time on like diagnosing the dead body again, it's dead. It's freaking dead, right?
Yeah.
So let's move forward. The other one is what I also find about vulnerability, which is like unlocked it for me, was that like, hey, if I'm trying to move forward, I don't want to waste time on something that's really dumb to me. And I realize that if I just own the mistake, if I'm working with you, Marcus, and I just come out and flat out say, I jacked this thing up, most people, when they hear that, are going to be like, oh, okay, he just totally owned it and I can't make fun of him anymore. I can't fight with him. What am I gonna? The guy just literally said he screwed up. What am I gonna say? Yeah, you really did screw up. Now let me cut you and throw some salt into it and squeeze a lime on it. No, like most people are gonna be like, all right, well I can't really berate him anymore because he owned it. I guess we're gonna move forward now. So it's also psychological when you're leading that team.
Yeah. And I think it does so much when you hear a leader say, hey, you know what? I messed up. And again, I think it's important to show like, I didn't do it maliciously. I thought I was making the best decision for our team, and I'm still committed to creating the win for us. Like, it starts with me owning that, but I'm also committed to creating the result. But I love that they ended on that one of declare amnesty. It's refreshing. Take a refreshing moment and say, what's dead is dead. The autopsy's done. Now, the mistake that I need to focus on fixing is tomorrow's mistake, because that's one thing that will be true to all of us as entrepreneurs, is no matter how good we are at all 7 of these things, guess what? Tomorrow we're going to make mistakes again. That's part of the game of entrepreneurship, is we fail more and faster than anybody else with the intent of becoming better and overcoming those challenges and growing. Any thoughts on that as we wrap up, Joe?
No, I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurialism is that you find a local gap that nobody else from a big business perspective has found value or being able to derive impact into. And it gives you energy because, yeah, you can make money off of it because there's a value gap. But the real big part is as an entrepreneur, you can actually see it manifest and change, right? I think most of us are like, I don't want to be in bureaucratic red tape where I can never see like the finished product. So as an entrepreneur, you're like, how do I fail fast, quick, and keep moving? Because those entrepreneurs that are able to deal with failure and persevere is actually the secret sauce to keep your idea moving forward. And eventually, if you get to nauseum, right, and you keep doing it and you just keep doing it, I almost want to say that most people, and if you're an entrepreneur, is like, you should love the thrill of people saying that's too hard, that's too tough, you can't do it, just to prove them wrong, because it's the persistence, not the like intellect, that usually allows people to persevere and win.
Yep. No, I agree with that. All right, Joe. Well, this has been a really fun conversation for me. It was fun for me to think through those, but it was really fun to hear your take on it. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. Keep sending this stuff over. For my listeners, anyone that wants to follow you or get to know you better and some of your content, where's the best place for them to find you?
So two things. I'm heavy on Instagram. So J Martin 561. So anybody that's from South Florida, yep, still kept that area code. But J Martin 561 on Instagram. And then I also have a podcast that drops on Wednesdays called Entrepreneurial Impact. So you'll hear a lot of my insights and things like that from communication on entrepreneurial impact, and that can be found on Apple as well as Spotify podcast.
Okay. Awesome, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate you being here today. Appreciate the friendship and look forward to growing with you this year. Enchilada Nation, hopefully you got some thoughts out of this content today. I encourage you to think through these 7 secrets to success and identify like where do you need to shift right now, because the beautiful thing is we're smack dab in the middle of Q1, which I don't want to over promise you that you've got a lot of time to think about it, because the actions we take today are going to determine your success for the rest of the year. But I thought this was a great conversation around some shifts that you need to make right now to grow this year. Know we're always here for you. Continue to lean in, subscribe, share this content out, and don't forget, go live life on your terms.